Hey there, folks. I'm Matt Hansen.
And I'm John Johnson.
And you're listening to Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. The podcast where we discuss favorites we've reread, both classic and new comics we want to read, and everything else in between.
And here's the comic we picked this week.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. Today, we're doing our poll winner, which was Pulp by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. And I got to say, we didn't have many votes on this one, did we, John? There's only one,
No,
right?
I was surprised that I was kind of, the April was kind of like I'd say it was more of like a random poll this month. We didn't really have a theme, but it's still like they all seemed interesting. And I do say, I want to go back and check out Chivalry. I was secretly hoping that was the winner, but
Right,
I was pleasantly surprised about this one. And now having read it, I like Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. So
yeah.
But this was a very cool, concise, fun story. So yeah, I'm glad it won actually.
Yeah, and I will say, so like, just in case anybody doesn't know, our patrons get to vote on our second episode of each month, and that's what we're talking about with the voting. And so if by any chance our patrons, didn't like what we threw out there for random picks, if you have any suggestions, patrons, please throw those out to us, and we'll add them and include them on future polls, so that way you got stuff you actually are interested in. But and we should also say thank you to the patrons. So thank you very much, Hoku, Otaku, Mike, Matthew, Christian, and Kyla. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate you. And yeah, usually our polls are themed every month. Patrons, they get exclusive episodes every month. They get an extra podcast just for them. And then, like Matt was saying, they get to vote in our poll. We have one poll every month for the second episode of our month, of our bi-monthly podcast here. And like I said, sometimes we'll theme it. This was just like a April podcast, spring, May randomness. I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't have a theme, but
yeah,
it was books that I had thought sounded cool, but we haven't really had a chance to check out on the channel. So
I think that's because we're really focused on we have a series going on for our patrons exclusive right now. We're doing a deep dive into The Watchmen. So yes. We're giving that comic its due. For the first time, really, for our podcast, we know a lot of, that's definitely the one graphic novel that every podcast about comics should do. And we are finally like sitting down and giving its due. I'm actually reading it for the first time. So it's really a good back and forth, because Matt was very surprised that I had never actually sat and read it.
I still can't.
So definitely, if you want to become a patron, that is a fun exclusive podcast just for y'all. So check it out. And again, you can also vote in our monthly polls.
Right. And to get that, you go to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word. So with that out of the way, what did you say? What?
I said it would help if we tell them that. That's
true. Oh yeah, that would be nice. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's dig into this book right away from the cover. What do you think of this cover of this book? Because for those who haven't heard of it, like we said, it's by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, who are known for crime and kind of noir comics for the most part. We've covered some of their other books. Reckless, we did a couple last year sometime. And I'm a big fan of Ed Brubaker. I've pretty much read most of his stuff. And I also love Sean Phillips as an artist as well. So I pretty much will pick up anything by them. But this one, because the cover is a cowboy, there's like a cowboy, and then it's like him riding a horse. And I was just like, Pulp, but it's about cowboys. That's interesting. So I was a little thrown when I first saw this cover. But then, like, right away, when you flip into it, you're like, oh, this is like a perfect idea. So what do you think when you first saw the cover?
So I was trying to, you said it was kind of like a crime thing, a story. And then, like you said, yeah, there's like a cowboy on the cover. He looks old and grizzly. And I didn't read any further into that. I went into this with complete blank expectations. I was trying to like piece something together ahead of time. I was like, what weird like twist is this could be? Is like the comic villain is like eats oranges and hates the pulp, or and like that, is that a crux, or what old west tone is this going to be and whatnot.
Right.
And it starts off and I'm like, okay, but the twist, or not necessarily twist, but the cool like narrative change at the beginning, like even that right away I was like, oh cool, like this is definitely going to be something different, so it got me right away.
So this book starts off with our main character Max, who is talking. We get like a picture of him on, I guess he's about to die, right? Like that's where we start off pretty much at the end of the book, at the very beginning on the first page, where he's about to die. And he's talking about how this is the third time he's almost died. And it says almost, but I'm pretty sure he's going to die here. And then we see that it is in New York City in 1939. But then we cut to like a Western situation, and it turns out that Max is a pulp writer in the 30s. So he's writing Western pulp stories about a guy named the Red River Kid. And, it's just regular pulp stories. But the cool thing about this is, it turns out that Max is in fact, or was in fact, in the Old West. The Red Rock Kid was his name when he was doing crimes as a bandit in the West. And I love this idea. The idea, because this is like a really interesting topic for me in like history, where that transition period between like the Old West and then there's industrialization, and with 20 years we're like, having steamships cross the Atlantic super fast and like all this stuff. And before that, it was just like sales and whatnot. So it's almost the same as like, I was born in the 80s before computers. I still remember pay phones and all that stuff, and not having, I remember when I first got my email and all that stuff, and it's almost the same thing. Like kids nowadays, like if I wrote a story about being back in the day, like that's what it would be like. And so, yeah, but even more so, because I think that transition is even more hardcore, of like from Old West to 1930s, fairly industrialized New York, on the cusp of World War II.
Oh yeah, just the difference of like, big open spaces and small little towns, and the things from, we kind of get into like the doctors and a little bit of modern medicine there too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, just to like his job, like he going from like, now he's writing these pulp comics, secretly, technically, about like things of his lived life, which is, again, I was right away, I was like, oh, that's such a cool like thing to throw in there. Like this is like he's going at this from different, because I was like, oh, he's just like a 30s comic writer, that's interesting. But then to see that, oh no, it's his stuff. But like, yeah, then to think about like, oh yeah, now he's coming into like an office, he's like, turning in his stuff, like he's doing a normal type of job now. Yeah. For lack of a better. So yeah, it's
horses on the plains. He's a 9 to 5.
Yeah. Like, yeah, and it's weird to think of like a perspective of someone that like live that. So that's really cool.
And then the funny thing at the beginning of this is, so he's handing, the latest story he's written about the Red River Kid into his boss. And his boss is like, I don't like the ending of this story. It's about him going to Mexico, and no one cares about Mexico, and that's boring. It sounds like he's going to retire. And it's like, Max has a double, like, yeah, but, it's like his life. So he can't really say that because it is unknown, because he was wanted as a a criminal cowboy or whatever, a bandit in the Old West. So he's like, not, I guess he's not under the same name, right, because he was the Red Rock Kid, but it's close enough. And it's kind of like a slap in his face of his own history when the boss is like, and no one cares about Mexico, this is boring shit. So, and then also he cuts his pay. He says like, oh, we're gonna have to cut your pay to 2 cents a page instead of what, like 5 cents or whatever it was, because the pulps aren't doing so well.
Yeah. Plus, we can get these kids here, and then he introduces him to an intern. It's like he can write it he writes it for 1 cent.
Yeah. So it's just like a whole. This is like also what they did in comics. So the pulps are not comics. You know that, right, John? They're actual like books.
Yeah. The
Okay.
like the little like nickel
Like
and dime.
yeah, dime books or whatever that they pocket
Yeah.
books kind of thing, and they were considered like trash but fun stories or whatever. And so it was literally the same as comics, where the editor is just like, we don't care about you. You signed your check away, or you signed your rights away when you signed the back of that check. So we own this character, even though it's like literally his life, stuff like that. So we get to see like the ins and outs of the pulp business, which is very similar to how the comic business was run up until pretty much the late 80s. I think is pretty much when they started changing that and giving creators rights and stuff to people who wrote new characters. So but yeah, so we see Max, he takes the money, he takes his check, which was like $120, but of course back then in the 30s, I'm thinking $120 is really good. And the boss says like, hey, stop complaining about your lower pay. The Great Depression is in effect right now. It's like just winding down. It's getting a little bit better, but everybody's still poor. So just be happy you got some fucking money. And so, Max, of course, is like, true, but I'm still mad about that. And as he's coming home, we see that, he's going through New York. We're getting the feel of New York in the 30s. We're seeing that on the train tracks that he's waiting by, or I guess it's like the metro station. There's like a Jewish guy that's like Hasidic. So he's got I don't know what they're called, the curls,
the side curls. Yeah.
And so he's being hassled by some blonde-haired white guys, which I'm assuming are Germans or something like that, because of the rest of the book that goes into some of the stuff. And Max does not like this, and I guess he's kind of mad from his boss treating him the way he did. So he decides to kind of stand up to these guys and tells them to leaves the Jewish kid alone. And he immediately gets punched in the face because he's an old man now. I mean, he was rough and tumble in the 1880s, but now it's 50 years later or whatever, and he's old. So
He's an old man.
He's an old man, and he gets punched in the face. And it says like, he probably could have taken a punch to the face and the beating, but it was his heart that gave out, unfortunately, during this attack. And so he has a heart attack right in the middle of this beating, and he fades out, and they actually rob him, and no one says anything or tries to stop them when they rob him and they beat him up. So that's a fun, little tidbit about New York in the 30s and probably now too. I don't know. But
yeah, I feel like that's probably not much changed in most places.
Yeah. So he has a heart attack. We find out a little bit more about his Old West days because there's like a flashback while he's in his heart attack, in coma. I don't know. He's passed out from his heart attack. So he has like, we get to see the Old West days where him and his brother were apparently kicked out of Wyoming or trying to get run out of Wyoming by a bunch of land barons that are cattle ranchers, and they're trying to take over their land. This reminded me a lot of the movie Open Range. Have you seen that movie, John?
Is that the one with the cows?
It's Kevin Costner.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I feel so silly. I went animated first. That's Home on the Range.
That's Home on the Range.
I am so sorry. I feel so silly.
No, John, I'm not talking about the Disney or DreamWorks movie or whatever. I'm talking about the hardcore Western that came out in the mid 2000s.
Yes, I was gonna say, that's such a weird way to like reference an animated like cow movie, man.
Yeah, this really reminded me of that animated cow movie for children. No, John, this did not do that. But have you seen Open Range with Kevin Costner? The rated
I have. Yes, it has been a while, but I've seen it.
Okay, yeah. So this reminded me of that just because that's about cattle ranchers taking over large swaths of area. Just if you have land, they'll just burn your house down and be like, yeah, our cows are here now. And like you could try to do something, but we'll hire a militia or like we'll hire guys to come and fuck you up. So that's kind of how we see this is how he started on his bandit path in the West. Was these cattle ranchers paid some people to burn his house down and kill them, and him and his brother got away. Or no, actually, does his brother? No, his brother gets killed, I think. He gets shot in the spine, and he has to ride off and leave his brother there because he gets shot as well. And then him and his friend Spike, I believe is his name, end up riding away. And since they have no house and no home anymore, they end up taking revenge on those guys, like, Old West style. So they put masks on, bandanas over their face, and they go kill the men that burned their house and stuff. And then that led to the life of being a bandit. So then we get that little tidbit or that little flashback, and then Max wakes up in present day, 1939 New York, and this is like him feeling his mortality. He's been robbed. He has no money, and he's been able to live paycheck to paycheck basically through the depression, which is good compared to most people. But he has nothing in savings. He's old, and we find out that he has a wife named Rosa. She's his wife, right? Or is she like just his girlfriend? I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say he doesn't make it quite clear if he wants to leave things to her, so I assume it's got to be wife, because you got to think about like logistics of that. Like that's what he's worried about. He's like, oh man, I'm realizing my mortality. I'm not gonna, if something happens, I'm not gonna have anything to leave for Rosa.
Right.
But to make it clear, it seems like he had a wife and kid at one point.
Yeah, in Mexico, when he went down to Mexico as the Red Rock Kid, he ended up retiring like his boss thought was boring, and then he had a wife and child there, and something happened. We don't know what happened with that.
I was like, well, we can get into it real quick because I think I inferred it from what they were talking about.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
So he and Spike retired down there, and Spike, the country retired life is not for him, and he unfortunately ends up drinking himself to death. And he says, and that was only a few years until the influenza came and took the rest of everything.
Oh, that's right.
So I think he was inferring that took his wife and child.
Yeah, the Spanish flu killed his wife and child. Yeah. So
yeah. So, but this is kind of sweet too. So he's been living in this apartment. Nobody really paid attention. This was one of the ladies who would basically, I think she lived there, but then she also like cleaned the whole apartment complex.
I don't know if she lived there, but she definitely cleaned the apartments for everybody.
And they struck up a conversation, and I guess they fell in love. So it's kind of, it's nice. Yeah. So I didn't say if they officially got remarried, but I would assume, like I said, if he's going to leave something to her.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it seemed like they have like a very loving relationship. So this is the 30s. I would think they would be married, but maybe not, because maybe he was wanted or something, so maybe he couldn't get married.
They sleep in the same bed. So, they don't have the
let's say they're common law married, at least.
Two separate, so, from the other side of the room.
Yeah. They don't have two separate beds like in I Love Lucy or whatever. So we see that, like he's nervous about leaving her with nothing. And then when he goes back to the office, after he recovers from the hospital and the heart attack and everything, the guy's like, oh, or he says like to his wife before he goes to the office, don't worry, like I'll make up the money by just writing a couple more extra stories faster. So he pulls an all-nighter. Then he goes to the office with these extra stories, and his boss is like, oh, we don't need those, because like John said, they have kids that'll write stories for a penny, so they're cheaper. But he's like, but I'm writing, it's my character, the Red Rock Kid. And he's like, oh no, Jimmy here, he's already got 3 more stories ahead of you in the Red Rock or the Red River Kid adventures. And so we're only paying him a penny. So yeah, we don't need your stories. So he's very angry about that, of course, because why wouldn't you be, right? So he goes to the movies, and he's thinking about just how much life sucks, and he doesn't want to leave his wife with nothing, and what's he going to do? And he just happens to notice that at the movie theater, I guess it's like the bank, the bank comes in with money and takes money out, from with what are those called? Armored car, right? There's an armored car pickup from the money and of the movie theater. So he sees that, and he's like, oh, you know what? Fuck it. I'm an old West bandit. I could do this shit. And we see a flashback to some of his previous robberies where he would rob stagecoaches, and then they even show him like robbing trains, and he's like hitting on the ladies, and he's like one of those suave characters like Owen Wilson in Shanghai Nights or something, like that's how I imagine him, or Shanghai Noon. That's that one. Where he's like hitting on the ladies that he's robbing the train from, and they like him, and so he's he's got grand ideas. So he's like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. So he starts scoping out this guard truck and following its path over the next couple of days, and he decides to rob it. So he gets his old gun belt out with his old 6-shooter, and on the day he goes to do it, he's ready. He's about to walk up to the guard, And just as he's about to pull out his gun and say, stick him up, someone comes out of the darkness or out off panel, comes out and grabs his arm and says, "Don't do it." And then Max is like, "What? Who the hell are you?" And he's like, "I know who you are, Max." Turns out this guy used to be an old Pinkerton, and his name is Jeremiah. And his name is Jeremiah Goldman, and that comes into play later because that is a Jewish name. And so, as a Pinkerton, he, of course, knew. If you don't know who Pinkertons are, Pinkertons were like the FBI back in the Old West. So they were trying to track him down for a long time. Then this guy retired. Then he started reading these pulp stories and was like, "These sounds very familiar." And then so he put 2 and 2 together and says, "Red Rock Kid, Red River Kid." It's probably the same fucking guy, So he just happened, I guess, like coincidentally to catch up and see him, and then see him try to commit this robbery. I think he was scoping him out over the last couple of days while he was scoping out this armored car. And so Jeremiah stops him from doing that. And, Max decides, okay, I'm not going to do it because Jeremiah is here and it would be stupid. And also Jeremiah's like, "You're an old man now. That guy would turn around and shoot you instantly. Like, you're not going to kill that kid, right? Like the guard for no reason." And so Jeremiah's like talking to him in a bar. They're shooting the shit, kind of talking about the old days. And then this kind of out of nowhere, Jeremiah's like, "Anyway, I got a robbery I would like you to do with me." And that might be why he tracked him down in the first place. I didn't put that together until just now, but maybe that's why he sought him out after reading the pulps. He's like, "Wait, I think I know this guy and I have a thing I want to do. So this guy's an old robber. Maybe he'll help me out." Jeremiah tells Max about this robbery. Basically, we learn about the Nazi Party and their prominence in the 1930s in America, and they were called the Bund, B-U-N-D, and this was a very real thing. I don't know if you know much of that history, John, but it was a pretty big political movement. I mean, fascism was considered like not like Nazi fascism necessarily, but fascism overall as a system of government wasn't really poo-pooed until World War II started, especially until Hitler kind of invaded the other countries in Europe. Before that, with like Mussolini, people would talk about how awesome the trains ran on time and how that system seemed to work really well. A lot of order, a lot of people doing what they're supposed to be doing in society. Like that guy's got his shit together. It's kind of like how they thought about fascism and Mussolini specifically. And then Hitler was kind of like, yeah, he's doing it too. But what's he doing over here? Like, what's all this invading stuff and these other things? And, we weren't even really in America, like non-Jews weren't really aware in the popular zeitgeist of what the propaganda was towards Jews. And also, I'm sure everybody was pretty racist back then anyway towards Jews. So they're probably like, yeah, we don't like them either. And then like once, we got into the war with the propaganda machine behind us, going to the movies saying like, support our troops and give all your aluminum and metals to recycling companies and stuff. Once that started happening, then we were like, screw fascism. Fascism's bad. So it took a while for that to actually happen. So we learned about the Bund and how they're sending money, apparently, that's what Jeremiah is telling him, to Germany and supporting the Nazis from America by American people. And so Jeremiah's like, man, I want to stop these guys. We can hit them where it hurts. I know where they send out the money, like where they ship it out to Germany every month. So all we got to do is plan this out. We'll see these guys taking boxes of money to the docks, I'm assuming is where they take it. And then all we got to do is hit them one month before they take it to the ship when they have it all boxed up, and we're good to go. So Max, is like, okay, like I'm going to get a cut of this. This is going to be great. This is going to be my nest egg. And Rosa and me can retire basically. And
there's one point I want to throw in here that I think was also key with it is that Max, and the reason he reached out to him with all that is he realized as he was following him all that time, like Max never was like, he seemed more like an opportunist and not like a bad guy per se.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what Jeremiah Goldman was saying here, is that like that's why I feel okay doing this, even though like I was a lawman or Pinkerton or whatever. Is like we need to give it to, stick it to the bad guys,
Right.
because they're always on top. And Jeremiah is a little Max is a little
negative,
like, well, negative about it, because he's like, yeah,
he's defeated,
because he's defeated, because he's like, yeah, the one, the bad guy seems to always win, but Jeremiah's like, no, we're gonna do this. And so he kind of builds his confidence a little bit for them to be able to do this. But I like that aspect of it, is that he's not really like a bad guy. He's just, like you said, like a guy who like just tries to do what's best for him and his it gets family at the time.
Right. Well, and also like he started out just getting revenge for people that killed his brother and took his land, and then he never, in all the flashbacks, you never see him shooting innocent people or anything. He's like, we just robbed the train, robbed the money that those land barons were putting in the banks, and then it kind of moved to more robberies, but it never showed him like getting violent with regular people.
Yeah, he even said like some of the people he worked with, like he stopped some guy from raping someone once, and he was like, I never understood like how some men can be like so evil and like have these like this need to like hurt people.
Right. Yeah. So now they have their plan, right? They staked out this Boone headquarters, and so they come the night that they're going to make their move. They get ready. Both old men have guns. They have like a shot-off shotgun and the 6-shooter, and the old men, the idea is basically they're just going to go through the back of where the Boone headquarters is and wait for, I think there's like a guy out back that's like either smoking that they're waiting for because they know he comes out to smoke all the time, or he's just a backdoor guard guy. And
and most of the main group is away because there's a big protest that night. That's like kind of the other crux of that is that,
there's a big Nazi there's a big Nazi parade thing going on. I don't know if there's a protest, but it's against
a protest against them. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant, is that there's a Nazi,
at the Nazi parade, and there are people protesting. So
the majority of them are not there, is what.
And also the police are busy with that too, because they're worried that something's going to happen there. So Max goes up to the guy that's smoking at the back door. He says the great line, he's just stick him up, which I love. He just, old habits die hard when you're from the Old West, I guess. And so, Max is sitting there, he's drawn on the guy, and Max, he's still not he's not a killer, so unless it's like the guys that killed his brother, I guess. So he lets the dude like draw on him almost. The guy pulls out a gun, and Jeremiah has to shoot him first with a shotgun. He has to shoot the German guy with a shotgun. And then Jeremiah gets all crazy and starts beating the guy up. Then they get inside the facility because he shoots the door open. And when they get in, it's obviously like a Nazi kind of headquarters. There's flags hanging with Nazi symbols. Of course, this is the page that my wife walked by and she's like, "What are you reading?" I'm like, it's not a book about Nazi stuff. All right, calm down. So like,
I'm reading. It's Indiana Jones. He's beating up the Nazis again. Okay?
Yeah, I'm like, this is people beating up Nazis, not the other way around. So, but yeah, so they go in there and they're like, they're looking through the boxes. They're going to the safes. Max is like, go to the safe, go here, go there, and Jeremiah, or no, actually, Max is looking in the boxes while Jeremiah is like, go to the safe. And he's obviously got an agenda. There's something here besides money that Jeremiah is after. And it takes Max a while to figure it out. But once he opens one of the crates, he sees they're full of flyers that say the truth about the Jew menace. So these are just full of flyers, not cash. And it's just supposed to be like, this is a propaganda wing. It's not a money wing necessarily. And if it is a money wing, it's all in banks. It ain't here like being shipped in crates. So Max realizes this and kind of questions Jeremiah about it, but obviously they can't do anything. But Jeremiah gets some books out of the safe that are pretty important, he says. And just then, the second, or the heart, Max's chest starts tightening. He's starting to have a second heart attack, And right when that happens, another guy that they didn't know was in the second office comes out and starts shooting at them. And Jeremiah's like, run, Max, we got to go. And so now Max has to run while he's having a second heart attack. And just as they're about to get away, they get into a car. The Boone is chasing them. They're getting shot at. Max has a heart attack at the wheel, and he wakes up in the hospital. It turns out second heart attack within a week, I think is what it is, or a couple weeks at least, and at most I should say. And Jeremiah is standing over him in the hospital bed, and the doctor basically told him, yeah, you're not, it could happen anytime now. 2 heart attacks in that short of time, like you don't have much time. So Jeremiah is pretty disappointed about that. And Max is disappointed at that and looks at Jeremiah, who's standing over him at the bed, and says, there was no money, was there? And he's like, no, there was money, but not like in cash bills. And he proceeds to tell Max that the reason why he wanted to break in there was because what they had was accounting documents that showed all the donors that give to the Nazi Party from America, which are all very important people, high up. And Jeremiah's like, yeah, we're going to get them, and it's going to be, I'm going to give these to the newspapers, and he's all, positive about it. And Max is like, are you fucking serious? Like, nothing's going to come of this. People don't care about this. And these are such powerful people that, they're going to either throw it under, or, they're going to try to hide it or pay someone or kill someone to get rid of that evidence. So Max isn't feeling too good about that, especially since he just pretty much gave up his life for that. Although he's happy, like, oh, that's great, but I'm going to die poor and leave Rosa with nothing. So Jeremiah says, okay, you know what? Actually, I got something for you. It ain't, the money that you thought you were going to get, but here's a deed to a house in Queens, and here's $8,000 in an account. So at least Max got what he wanted, because that's the main thing he wanted for Rosa, was a house somewhere away from the city, or like not in the middle of the city like his apartment was, somewhere
exactly.
safe.
A place to call their own, some a little bit financially okay. So
yeah,
something. Yeah. And now he just like can't really do anything. They're like, don't even take like a flight of stairs, man, because we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So he immediately after he's able to walk out of the hospital, goes to a lawyer, signs, like puts all that stuff in Rosa's name, so there's no confusion about, in case he dies, who owns the land, the new house, and the bank account. And he tells Rosa, hey, we're moving to a house, this is going to be great. And then one day, while I guess I don't know if he's moved yet. I guess he has. They have moved already. So a while later, they've moved, and Max is like, you know what? He's reading the newspaper, and he sees in the newspaper that, and this is after Hitler invades Czechoslovakia. So that was like the, I guess Poland. I'm not trying to remember what happened first. If Czechoslovakia was first, I think Czechoslovakia was first, and then Poland was the linchpin that broke the camel's back, where Europe got into the war. But or where I guess France and England got into the war. But yeah, so Czechoslovakia is invaded by Hitler. The war, the kind of the tides are turning as far as public opinion about Hitler and stuff a little bit in America at that point. And also he sees on the second page, there's an article that says Nazi-linked banker resigns in disgrace. So it seems that Jeremiah's documents have actually worked, and they've found, they've actually gotten people arrested in higher places, or at least some people, at least. And he's happy about that. So Max is like, you know what? I'm going to go thank Jeremiah for everything he's done. And he goes to Jeremiah's house. And when they were trying to set it up, their plans, they saw the reason why they were able to find this Boone headquarters, the Bund headquarters or Boone headquarters, is because in Jeremiah's apartment complex was one of the Boone workers, one of the guys that worked there. And so this Nazi lived in Jeremiah's apartment complex. He would always beat up his sister, and not Jeremiah's sister, but the the Nazi's sister would beat up his own sister. And so as he gets to the apartment, he sees a body being pulled out, and the cloth just happens to be not covering the face totally, and he sees it's Jeremiah. And he's like, "Oh my God, that's my friend. What happened?" And the paramedics are like, "Oh, he broke his neck falling down the stairs.
Just fell down the stairs. Sad accident."
Yeah. Oh, it always happens. Old people falling down the stairs. And then as Max goes in to see what's going on, he sees the sister of the Nazi sitting on the stairs, and he asks her what happened. And she apparently is not very much into the Nazi stuff, probably because her brother beats the shit out of her all the time. But she says basically her brother was hitting her in the hallway. Jeremiah said to stop it. And the Nazi brother and all his friends that were there as well decided to throw the Jewish man, because they started calling him a Jew, and they threw him over the railing. And that's how he broke his neck. So he was killed by these guys. And I was like, after they do the heist, I was kind of like, I don't know where this is going to go. Like,
yeah,
what else can happen? Happy ending or whatever, right? He gets to live with Rosa at the end of the days. But I love where this goes. This was like the most badass ending ever.
And this part I thought was really interesting, because he goes and he's like, tell me the truth, what happened. And I turned the page and immediately I was like, oh God, like he's already been like, like what about my life? He's got everything in order now. Oh shit, this is about to turn into Clint Eastwood movie. He's about to go
he's gonna off himself or something.
Yeah, like what is going on here? And yeah, so this right here really was like, oh man, like it felt like a punch
in the gut.
Yeah.
Also, like, we're reading this book and it's not very long. It's only 77 pages. And, there's like, a couple pages left. And I'm like, where is this going to go? Like, Jeremiah dies. That's sad. What's going to happen? So this goes out the most metal way it could possibly go out, which I fucking love. So he's like, they did what to Jeremiah? And so he decides, you know what? Rosa's taken care of. I could die at any moment, so I might as well go out the way I want to go out. So he decides, since they've been scoping out the Boond and they know where they hang out and whatnot, he's gonna go take out and get revenge for Jeremiah on the brother that killed him. So he goes to a Boond headquarters where they're doing like a meeting kind of thing, and I'm sure this kind of reminded me of like what's that movie? The movie with the Coen Brothers movie with George Clooney and everybody that's in the Old West, and they
yeah, the
I want to say No Country for Old. Yeah, Oh Brother Where Art Thou. I want to say No Country for Old Men. I'm like, that's not it. So yeah, Oh Brother Where Art Thou? Where like there's the Klan meeting in the middle of nowhere kind of thing, but this is like in a hall, like a beer hall is where they're having this meeting. So he goes down there. They call it a beer house, a Bohemia beer house, a Boond only club. And so he goes down there and he's got the sawed-off shotgun. He's got his 6-shooter. He's ready to go. And he goes up to the doorman, and the guy's like, "Oh, can I help you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm here to meet the Nazi brother, whose name is Arnie." And he's like, "Oh yeah, go right ahead, because you look white and all right." So he just lets him in, and immediately, Max knows what Arnie looks like, so he goes up to Arnie. He's like, "Hey, Arnie," and then Arnie turns around and is like, "What?" And then he gets shot in the face with a shotgun. Max kills him with a shotgun right in the face, and then proceeds. And I like this. It was like there was like a panel of him in the Boond beer house, and then there's like a panel of him shooting people in the Old West, and it was like back and like he's having flashes of his Old West days and the brightest moments of him in shootouts in the Old West. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Like, going back and forth, and everybody in the Boond house also has guns, so they just start shooting him as well. So it's basically he's taking some out, he's shooting people in the head, but he also is getting shot a bunch, and right where he falls is right where the comic started, where we just saw his face in the beginning, but now we see he's shot in the chest 3 times. There's a bunch of dead people around him on the ground, but he took him out, and that's how it ends. It just ends with him killing all these as many Germans as he can, as many Nazis as he can.
Yeah,
before,
Nazis and Nazi sympathizers.
Exactly. No, not sympathizers. These are Nazis.
Yeah, all the people there are Nazis. It's true.
Yeah.
It's
They're just not in Germany Nazis. So, because the Nazi Party was a party in America, like as far as a political party. So
yeah,
it wasn't just it wasn't like the KKK were in politics, but it wasn't like they were running on the KKK ticket, or at least out loud. They might have been on that, like, hush hush wise, but there was like, a Nazi party in America. So in the 30s. So yeah, so he goes out like a boss, man. I fucking love the ending of this book. And I don't know about you, but I'm like, this is a movie. Like 100%. I would love to see this movie.
For real. Like you said, it made me feel like Clint Eastwood right away. Like guy from the Old West, just like having one last, like trying to live his life and then have one last. And it kind of, it also gave me vibes of that one Clint Eastwood movie, Gran Torino.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because because it's a little similar at the end, because he goes to where all the gang members are, but in that one it's more to get them all in trouble for killing him. But still, the same concept of him being like, I'm going to be I'm going to take matters in my own hands. So I really enjoyed that, and that's how you go out if you have to go out.
If you had to go out, take some Nazis with you.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, I was like reading this. This is the second time I read this, actually, because I read this maybe 2 months ago for the first time, and I just thought it was great. Really quick read. It's fast, but it's got a really good story, and it's got it's a crime book. It's not quite a noir, I don't think, but it definitely is a crime book. And I don't think it's noir because it doesn't have like that detective feel to it. It just has a crime story kind of thing. So, but yeah, I like this book a lot, and the art is fantastic in it. And I was really happy when it won the poll, because I wanted to talk about it with you. So, so with that being said, John, what would you give it? What did you think?
I loved it. Like you said, it's a fun story. It's concise.
I don't know if it's a fun story, but it's
well, fun is it, like it was a fun read. Like exactly. Like I enjoyed it. Like every page flip, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like that's a fun little turn. Like that's a neat addition to it. All the little pieces that laid in together. I really enjoyed it. And we've read, like you said, some Brubaker crime stuff before, so I was like, okay, like this is definitely, he has a niche for this. So
well, yeah, I mean, that's all Brubaker writes for the last 20 years is crime stuff for the most part. So I don't think I'm trying to think of something written that wasn't some kind of crime or spy thing. So I mean, he wrote Captain America, but that was like an espionage.
Yeah, that was So
yeah, so I can't think of something he's written that wasn't that. That wasn't like a crime or a spy thing in the last couple of years, in the last 20 years. So, so yeah. Well, so what would you give it, John? Oh, I think we lost John. You're on mute. You muted yourself. There you go.
I sure did. How about that? I don't know how that happened. Anyway, well, like you said, he's good at it. And even though this one, like was said, was shorter, it was a nice, concise little story, and it had enough to keep you going and keep you involved. So I really enjoyed it, and the art was wonderful. We didn't really speak on that much, but the Old West, when it panned back to that, it felt very like kind of like sepia,
muted tones,
muted, grainy, except for the Red River Kid, who had a big, his whole shirt was like a deep, rich red. That was fun, like to give him that specifics. So yeah, and then when it went to modern day, it was either, if it was them doing the heist, it kind of got like a little more like bright and colorful. But then when it was like just them talking or him walking around New York, it was very dark and kind of like wet, grimy.
Wet, grimy, tones. Dingy city is what I got from it.
So all of that worked really well with the story as too. So Sean Phillips, and then obviously I feel bad, the gentleman who did the coloring on this.
It's his son, actually. Sean Phillips' son did the coloring in this. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So just everything was nailed on this. So I'm going to give this one a solid 9. Like, I really enjoyed it. It was a great story.
Yeah, this is one you could just pick up. Yeah, the son's name is Jacob Phillips. So,
Jacob
but
Phillips.
yeah, you could give this to anybody because it's so short. It's a quick read. It's a nice, cool one. One full story in a book. And I know that there's like it's pretty cheap too. I think it's like $12.99. But there's also like a hardcover version of it that's called the Process Edition. That's the book itself, and also it's like oversized, and it has the full script in it, which I'm kind of tempted to buy. But that's like $50. So I'm like, do I buy it? I kind of want it. So yeah, I'm on the edge of that. I missed the hardcover that came out originally for this, but that was not oversized. So I'm kind of like, I want the oversized art because I like the art so much. But yeah, so I'm gonna give this one an 8, a solid 8. I don't think it's the best thing he's ever written. I will say my only criticism of this is Max is pretty spotless as a character. Like for someone who grew up in the 1800s, he's pretty chill with racism, or like he's pretty chill with not being racist. Like he doesn't seem to care about Jews or Hispanic people, and that kind of thing, which I guess makes sense, maybe depending on where he obviously went to Mexico and stuff. But it just seemed like, well, he would definitely have some kind of like prejudices from back then, because he's a man of his time. And yeah, it just seemed like he was a little too spotless for me as like a believable 100% character, and like in like that time period. But it is like a good story, so I don't mind it. Like if this was a character that I prefer my crime characters to be a little bit more gray, like Parker, where he's a bad guy, but he's got a code and he lives up to that code. This was a little more like he's kind of a Boy Scout. He doesn't, like in the Old West, he doesn't kill anybody unless they did something to him or something, or they deserved it. Whereas, if he was bank robbing, I'm sure he killed people, but he didn't show any of that in this, So if he's robbing people randomly, there's got to be someone he accidentally shot, but they didn't show any of that, and he didn't seem to have any of that in his past that we saw, at least. So I just felt like it was a little too clean as a character for me, but that's just me. I'm picky with my crime stuff.
Yeah. And I'm fine with that because I like a more squeaky clean.
Yeah, you had a problem with Parker in the first book because you were like, I thought he was going to be good.
That's true.
But he's mean. I'm like, yeah, he's a fucking robber.
But why is he gotta be mean?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm gonna give this an 8. You're gonna give it a 9. We have not picked what we're gonna do for the first week of May yet, but we will let you guys know in a post about that. But we already know what we're doing for this week's Patreon pick, which is The Watchmen Part 2 of 3. So we're gonna read issues 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we're going to give our thoughts of that for The Watchmen. And that'll be coming out next week. And yeah, that's going to be interesting because that's like the big middle part of the story, which should be fun. And yeah.
Yeah. And like we said, if you're new to the channel or you're thinking about Patreon, that's fun, especially with me. Again, only thing I had seen the movie and the show. And again, Matt was like, well, that's not even the heart of like what goes on in like the real meat of the story. So like, how do you say what the Watchmen is?
Yeah.
So it is good, and I guess I already saw the differences in the first part, so I'm excited to get into the second part with them. So yeah. It's definitely worth a listen.
Should be fun. So if you want to get into that, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/planestrains-comic-books, all one word, or Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, all one word. And I think we're done. You got anything else, John?
Now with that, yeah, don't forget to check out, like, share, and subscribe everything. We always appreciate that, especially on YouTube. So with that, I think we'll see you on the next one.